One of the hardest things that we do as developers is trying to estimate our work. So what do we do in situations where we're asked to estimate things as a software developer or a game developer? I've come to learn a bunch of ways that we can deal with estimating that makes our life easier, because there's nothing worse than making some wild guess at how long something's going to take just purely based on how good you think you might be at programming. And then partway in, just discovering that the problem is more complex than you originally expected. And it's going to take you a lot longer, and you're going to be embarrassed. And, you're going to work yourself really hard to try to make up for it, try to do what you said you could do. How are we going to solve this in an intelligent way, or try our best to avoid bad estimations that can get us into trouble, leading us to overwork ourselves and ultimately really have a bad time doing work? Here's a few of the ways that I've learned to cope with this responsibility, and they're not going to be like the ways that you might expect, like, just add a buffer. It's not going to be the obvious things. I'm going to try to talk you through what you can do to estimate more accurately up front and make your job overall better, and what to do once you've screwed your estimations up, just in case that happens, which inevitably it kind of always will. What's the course of action after we have an estimation that's wrong? So the first thing that we need to narrow down is, what are the responsibilities with our estimation? It's easy to think like the buck stops with us because we're the software developer. We go, oh, it's going to take me 2 hours to do that fix. And as a tip, I would say never estimate anything less than 2 hours, because as a human being that has an attention span that you have to manage throughout the course of your day, for me, 2 hours just seems about right. Unless it's something extraordinarily trivial, you get the gist. So what are the other responsibilities that you're actually estimating for? This isn't a thing that's really obvious up front. Sometimes you think, that's going to take me 2 hours, the task is 2 hours long. But what about testing? What about client feedback? What about any of this revisiting type of work? Or what happens if you do the work and somebody else on the team, even if they're not a tester, finds a bug with it, or they need you to rework it so that your work plays well together. These are the kinds of things that we're often blindsided by after making an estimation, and these are the kinds of things that add up over the course of a project that end up making your initial estimations really difficult to work with, because you didn't estimate the full scope of what you needed to consider, like all the responsibilities in the chain. Which means that when I'm thinking of any given thing, for example, if a client says, hey, we want this really basic change, I know that maybe it will take 2 hours of my time, but the round trip before they receive it may be more than a day, because it has to go through testing and things like that. So getting those things boiled down and understanding what's the additional parts is really important. The next thing that we can do is we can reduce uncertainty. What we typically do have a good grasp on, even if we don't have a grasp on the problem that we're trying to actually create a solution for, is our own abilities. So if somebody's asked you to, for example, make something in JavaScript and you don't know any JavaScript, well, then how long it would take you to make something in JavaScript is actually highly uncertain, because you don't know what you don't know about JavaScript. Or if you need to work with like a new AR framework or something like that and you've never worked with it before, this is one of those situations where you have lots of uncertainty. So in a situation where you have uncertainty, you should solve it by identifying constraints that you can put on that problem so that you can reduce uncertainty. So the next thing you can do is just don't estimate at all. If you don't know the answer, don't estimate. And if you need to explore the space to get an answer, then you should probably go and do that. You should negotiate and say, look, like, this is a space that I don't have any familiarity with. For example, like AR, it could be that you've never done AR before, or you've never worked with that particular framework, or you don't know what it even does, which is sometimes the case when you're doing these types of jobs. So explain that you actually can't estimate in this situation, and that the strategy will need to be that you take some amount of time to go explore and see what you actually can do and whether that thing will actually meet your needs. And that way you can save a lot of time by spending a little bit of time up front just to make yourself more certain, I suppose. And then you can buffer according to your uncertainty. So if you explore and you say, hey, look, like within an hour, I achieved maybe 20% of what I thought I was going to achieve, maybe the other 80% would take, a proportionate amount of time. So that could be like another 4 hours on top. But we want, we actually don't know that much about this thing. So we're going to add, double or triple that to make sure that we have plenty of time to fully understand the process. Sometimes when we are estimating, we will try to estimate the large problem. And we'll say, hey, look, I think that problem will take, 4 days, 5 days or something like that. But when we break that large problem down into many small pieces and then we estimate them individually, it actually looks like twice or 3 times as much as that, and we didn't know. So don't fall into the trap of not breaking your tasks down into really small pieces and thinking that they're all going to be easy. If you think the problem is even slightly complex, try to break it down. Okay, so say we've made a bad estimate already and now we're dealing with the consequences of that. What can we do? These things happen from time to time, and it's our job as software developers to educate the people we're working with and for exactly what's going on in our world. And it can feel like you should just take all of that responsibility yourself and like try to throw in some kind of heroic effort and push all the way to the end and, get it done somehow, but you may not know if somehow is even going to work. And that is one approach, but I would strongly discourage you from going down that road because it really leads to overtime, and overtime leads to burnout and dissatisfaction with your job. And ultimately, it's just not long-term sustainable. Like if you keep going down this same approach of just estimating by guessing, you'll end up in an endless loop of working ultra hard, feeling really frustrated, and really taking an unfair amount of responsibility on yourself about, your performance ultimately, because you feel like you should have been able to do it better, but maybe you couldn't do it better. That's just life. Like, things take time, and no matter how much you work, there's only a certain amount of time in the day. So, sometimes we have no choice but to leave it till tomorrow because tomorrow is chasing us down no matter how hard we work at this problem. Don't try to account for estimations with a heroic effort. First of all, you need to step back and reassess. And this will be where we pretty much go back to our reducing uncertainty, and we need to communicate what we have tried, what hasn't worked the way we expected it to, and what options we have to go forward. Sometimes we might find at a really inconvenient time that what we're trying to achieve cannot be achieved the way that we're approaching it. That is probably the worst situation to find yourself in. However, it does mean that your literal only solution is to approach the problem differently. And if you just try to approach the problem the same way through brute force, it may be unattainable, or it may be just a massive detriment to yourself, your business, your staff, if there's any people working for you, to even attempt it this way. However, usually the solution that we're approaching isn't necessarily the end goal. The solution was a strategy to achieve something for the end goal. So if we can step back and reevaluate, what was the end goal? Is there anything else in this space that can help get us towards that goal and satisfy us and still be interesting or compelling, but it isn't the exact path that we expected to take at the start? And sometimes this is what happens in projects, and it's entirely normal. So that's what I would encourage you to do if you've got into a situation, Also, it's super important that you communicate to the team and up the chain, and don't be tempted to fall into this endless super overtime trap, because by doing that, what you begin to do is fail to send signals up the chain to where problems can get solved like this. So if you as a software developer are struggling and you may not be able to achieve this, the longer you hold on to it as a personal responsibility type of thing, the more you've put yourself in a situation where you are withholding the signals that need to go to, say, the project manager or producer or whoever you work with, and to the client and to other people that help make the decisions with this, so that you can actually come to a solution that's ultimately going to save you. So be aware that, try not to think it's you, and just be conscious that by taking on this responsibility yourself, you are actually withholding the messages and signals that the people that you work with really depend on from you. And if you do that, it's actually a detriment to everyone, not just yourself. So that's my advice to you. And if you're working with somebody who is in this situation and they have failed to achieve what they thought that they could achieve, I would encourage you to sort of, if you're working with them, you're already watching the video, but if there's somebody else, send this video to them and help them to see what you may have mistakenly done and how you can improve this for yourself in the future, and how they can help support you to improve this situation for yourself in the future. That's all from me. I hope you like this video. I hope it helps you. Throw a like, throw a comment if you have any other questions or any other thoughts on this, or if you have something that could help somebody else. Subscribe if you like to subscribe. I'll usually talk about game things, camera things, and maybe like life stuff too. So cool. Peace.